Lecture 7, Conflict and Team Effectiveness. Okay, so we were introduced to Charles Kettering during our lecture covering problem solving. Recall he said, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. Well, here's another Ketteringism for you. That's what we called these when I was an eager fresh out at GM. No one would have crossed the ocean if he could have gotten off the ship in a storm. Now think about a tug-of-war competition. Yeah, typically it's a team of folks all pulling away. Can anybody hop off? No, not really. Can anybody give up and act like they're pulling? Yeah, could probably pull that one off, pun intended. Could infighting and petty conflicts that were occurring before the tugging started impact the performance of the team? Yeah, sure. Now, relate this to the Kettering quote. Can a ship in a storm push a crew to the breaking point and collapse the situation to every man for himself? And the answer is a big whopping yes. I'd like you to hit pause here for a second, grab our book, MOB, and turn to page 354, table 10.4, Dysfunctions versus Disciplines of a High-Performing Team. So hit pause, and I'll wait for you to get your book open. So pause! Okay, so I like table 10.4. It really packs a ton of concepts into a nice and neat package. So follow with me here. The 5 dysfunctions of a team are: teams get too big. So a discipline behind that might be a coordination of some sort, because it can become a coordination nightmare. How about casual team assignments? Yeah, absolutely. Personality, skill set, overall contribution and ability, that's all super key there. Dysfunction number 3, inattention to results. And this one falls into clear metrics, a clear vision of what winning looks like, and can be fortified by a powerful command intent that leaves the how for the team members to figure out. Not the who, what, where, and when. That's satisfied with the command intent. Number 4, absence of commitment and trust. And what you need there is productive norms and effective conflict management. And finally, number 5, unclear accountability. That is the sort of what we, the team, are responsible for, and the sort of what you, the team member, are responsible for. Got to have that delineated. And there is so much here to lecture from in this chapter. And as I mentioned in our first lecture, remember way back when, in our nice comfy lecture hall on campus there, the book is about 30 miles wide and about 1 inch deep. Well, one dysfunction that I have seen in my experience, let's call it the apex predator team killer, if you will, is poor conflict management. Point 4, all the other dysfunctions will make themselves evident as you work through conflict management. So yes, conflict managed poorly can kill team spirit. It can kill team effectiveness, and it can absolutely result in a team's failure to achieve expected goals. What I'd like you to do here is to view conflict as a gift. Yeah, a gift. And I'll use the rest of this lecture to tell you why I believe conflict is a gift. Conflict can become poisonous, and often there is a tipping point. Someone on the team starts reading from the Negative Negotiator Handbook. Now, your book does a very nice job in Chapter 11 of discussing the ways to identify poisonous pathways. And I call your attention to Table 11.6 on page 396. And the authors do a nice job of proposing countermeasures. But what precipitates all this, right? Here I offer a list. It's not all-encompassing, and yes, others might be added from your own experience, but take a moment and read through this list. I'm going to ask you to pause while you do that. So, pause! Now, can you recall a time as a team member where you or your team faced one or more of these situations? And how did the team leader act in the face of this situation? Look, there are many leader missteps that can kill and destroy teamwork, causing conflict avoidance, right? Here are a few examples of how a leader can destroy a team by avoiding conflict. Here's one. The leader stops being curious and really no longer listens to folks or the issues that are being raised in the meeting. He's checked out. How about this one? Intimidating or threatening subordinates and instilling fear of reprisal so that folks don't want to speak up. Maybe the leader has a history of judging people in the room and voicing those judgments when opinions differ from theirs. Or if others have opinions that aren't super strong, but these people don't want to appear vulnerable, so they just pipe down. How about when the leader appears only to be self-interested? Or there's a tendency for the leader to interrupt other team members before they get their ideas out and complete. And here's a nice one too. When the leader makes personal attacks when they're not getting their way, or starts playing politics and fomenting dissension between team members, generating unhealthy conflict. And I've seen that one go down firsthand. So Howard Shore, he's a certified behavioral analyst, and he earned his MBA and his bachelor both from Florida International University. In his article, Conflict Avoidance Hurts Teamwork, tells us that a great way to tell whether you have a strong team is by the amount of regular, healthy conflicts that occur in meetings when decisions are being made, or if decisions are really being made at all. It is often said that if everyone agrees, then someone is not needed. Now, this may be true, but the real issue may be that the team dynamics in the organization, they're simply broken. This breakage may be causing key people that can be contributing to stop contributing. Jeffrey Colvin, senior editor-at-large of Fortune magazine, writes in his 2006 article, Why Dream Teams Fail. And in his thesis, there are main issues as to why the teams fail. He's got three of them here, right? One, failing to build a culture of trust. Second, letting conflicts fester. And then third, hiding from the real issues. Now, many companies do try to sort of speed the trust building process, right? Often these team building exercises are held at some woodsy corporate offsite with people falling backwards off tables into the arms of their coworkers. That's some sort of a way of learning trust, I guess, right? And maybe it helps. I don't know. I mean, I went to one particularly interesting team building offsite. The management team I was part of went to this post-apocalyptic dystopian type landscape paintball park, right? We rented the entire park. And it was a blast, man. It was totally cool, right? However, it turned kind of ugly. At one point, I came upon one of my colleagues, we'll call him Phil, right, who was standing over our group's director, Jim, who had fallen. And Phil was literally pumping Jim full of paintball lead at point-blank range with no mercy, right? I mean, we actually had to restrain Phil and take the paintball gun away from him. It's nice, huh? A little buried conflict there, maybe. So Jeff outlines that today consultants, they've developed maybe some additional exercises, probably not paintball, that involve people sharing personal experiences or revealing their personality type, based on the valid insight that reciprocal vulnerability is the beginning of trust. But the process can only be rushed only so fast. So Jeff goes on to explain that culture of trust is fragile and laboriously created. He continues that if you read the extensive literature on team effectiveness or talk to people on teams in sports or business or elsewhere, it always comes down to this. Trust is the most fundamental element of a winning team. And I can tell you this, from my experience, that trust is built over time, step by step, and I dare say conflict by conflict. And it's how you respond to conflict individually and as a team that builds trust. If people think their teammates are lying, withholding information, plotting to knife them, or just freaking incompetent, man, nothing of value will get done. And even if team members can set aside those antagonistic mindsets, right, they rarely have time to develop confidence in one another's behavior. The challenge is to keep the inevitable personal agendas from becoming destructive. That's part of the team leader's job. So Jeff gives us a great example of festering conflicts. Colonel Stas Przuski, the coach of the Army crew team at West Point a few years ago, faced a baffling problem. Through extensive testing, he had developed objective criteria to rank his rowers, right? He then put the 8 best, his dream team, in the varsity boat, and the 8 other guys he tossed in the junior varsity boat. The problem was the JV boat beat the varsity boat 2/3 of the time. Now, the situation was explained in a Harvard Business School case, and that was that the varsity team was full of resentment each other about who was contributing the most, while the JV team, feeling they had nothing to lose, supported one another completely and happily, right? So one day, Brzezinski lines up the varsity crew guys in pairs, and he tells them to wrestle. No punching for 90 seconds. Well, there were no clear winners. Each man was discovering that his opponent was just as strong and determined as he was. Brzezinski then had them change opponents and wrestle again. By the third round, they were choosing their own opponents. One guy would point to the other and say, "You," Brzezinski said. So finally, one of the rowers started laughing. And then they all started piling into a general brawl. Eventually, one of the guys said, "Coach, can we go and row now?" And from then on, the varsity boat flew. So Jeff tells us you probably can't order members of your team to wrestle, though it might be tempting. But bringing tensions out into the open and resolving them is one of the team leader's most important jobs. Put the fish on the table, says George Cole Rieser, a professor at the International Institute for Management Development in Switzerland. He says you've got to go through the smelly, bloody process of cleaning the fish, but the reward at the end of the day is a great fish dinner. So most people don't really want to be the ones who throw the proverbial fish on the table, right? Why might that be? Well, maybe there's a veneer of politeness. We don't want to raise our differences in front of the boss, right? Maybe it's a culture of polite restraint. Or perhaps people just don't feel free to express their honest feelings about the most important issues. Maybe dissenting viewpoints are nipped in the bud when a person with legitimate power on the team says, "We don't have time for this." Look, recall our Chapter 2 lecture, Confirmation Bias and Groupthink. And now think about our Cali-bound flight crew and that story I related to you regarding confirmation bias. And on top of all that, now, consider the 4 points in the box on our slide. How might a leader foster and encourage groupthink? Your job as a team leader is to insist that the team members say what's on their minds. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has a great saying. It goes like this: respect people, attack problems. So we begin to see where the preceding chapters all begin to converge here, right? Problem solving, ethics and values, communication and power, leadership and the critical linkage to your moral compass, all of this. Professors Hammond, Shelton, McKenna, and Darling are about to challenge us in a way of thinking that may sound like common sense, while at the same time it's startling in its demands from all of us for honest introspection. First comes tension. Maybe it's a difference of opinion or a misunderstanding. Maybe it's an over or underestimation. Essentially, we're saying that meaning is in dispute here, right? When we don't understand one another, then we need to communicate. And the quality of communication is key in determining the ability for a team to build trust over time. Building trust is not a static process. It's dynamic, and it's not linear. It can often be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And it can also be killed, right? Recall the apex predator. Squishing conflict in communication is a poor conflict management method, period. This means that building trust requires continuous attention, kind of like driving a car through the mountains. So when communication is effective, relationships built on trust are built over time. And the results of this are a willingness to do whatever is necessary to make things work, and also a calmness when unexpected things happen. The development of this level of awareness regarding communication and conflict requires attention from organizational leadership with a special focus on attention to interpersonal relationships. In short, trust must be a priority. Consider the values that are expressed in thought, word, and deed at your company. Does the word trust come to mind? And if it doesn't, you got to ask yourself, what does that mean to me? So the traditional view of conflict is negative, right? It's typically been seen as dysfunctional, destructive, irrational, time-consuming. Okay? And as a result, conflict has been deemed something to be eliminated, or at least suppressed. Conflict occurs when one individual's goals, values, or style bump up against someone else who sees the world differently. It happens, right? Traditionally, these points of increased tension have been tightly managed, but that interferes with the natural process of feedback and iteration. As a result, the individuals involved are not allowed to be with their conflict until it reaches a boiling point, and sometimes it's laced with destructive emotions. So now, here's the gift of conflict. The tension of conflict generates important new options. Conflict leads to change. If conflict is suppressed, well, the team members often retreat back to the state of apparent peace, right? Well, these conflicts still fester just below the surface. Think about our West Point varsity boat squad. And consequently, conflicts eventually require some conflict management intervention when they resurface, right? Look, avoiding conflict is impossible, and managing it is a task that just leads to frustration and fatigue. Furthermore, when conflict is overly managed, and I'll call that nipped in the bud, right, opportunities for improvement and for building of trust are blocked. Interpersonal conflict is not only unavoidable, it's necessary. It's necessary for individuals and organizations to evolve. Each conflict situation, if well handled, offers teams opportunities for trust building and transformation. Conflict challenges the status quo, and it's a breeding ground for innovation. It also helps avoid groupthink. However, successful transformation through conflict requires effective communication between everybody involved. The bottom line here is this: change involves conflict. Right? Conflict is not only essential, it gives all involved an opportunity to integrate their beliefs with others who may have different ones from their own. And out of this, a higher level of trust and team functioning will emerge. So a manager committed to this idea that conflict is a gift might challenge those in conflict to, choose to see events through a different positive lens. And you may have to help frame that, right? Remember our Socratic method? Well, it might be time to pull that tool out. Or you might ask them to identify at least 3 things they agree on or 1 thing they appreciate about each other. You can invite those in conflict to participate in playful, paradox-filled brainstorming sessions too. Create a mind map, if you will, of impossible win-win solutions. Look, there are many possibilities, but none of them would involve the traditional, logical, linear, shut the conflict down conflict management approach. Now, all the best processes will hinge upon this assumption, and that is this: the conflict has within it a gift that surfaces through the act of appreciation. I'm going to say that again. Conflict has within it a gift that surfaces through the act of appreciation. The realization there's a gift within conflict is in itself seeing events through a positive lens. So to receive this gift of conflict, one must appreciate that the other person is really seeing things differently, from another vantage point, or through a different lens, so to speak. In effect, this person may in fact be covering your blind spot and showing you that which you do not see. And man, I personally appreciate that when that goes down. However, there are a few things that must be in place to foster such a result. First, information must be freely available. Information is a catalyst, right? It disrupts the current system, right? The current status, and paradoxically, it enables conflict to emerge. And second, avoid closed-door conversations, undisclosed financials, exclusive strategic planning processes, or any other we, they, have-nots type of communication, right? Closed-door communications can build distrust. Yes, sometimes they have to happen, but just be cool about it when they do. What I'm talking about here is developing a habit to embrace conflict. Now, recall the lesson from Stephen Covey that habits take practice. They are learned and they take time to develop, both good and bad habits. For example, guard against the habit of intercepting, squashing, or resolving conflict for others. Instead, support those in conflict and encourage them to use their inner wisdom to discover innovations and win-win solutions, right? Act as a source of continuous feedback and share observations of behavior. Then step back and let the feedback sink into their heads and see where they go next. If enough factual, non-judgmental feedback is provided in a safe and supportive way, right, trust will build with those in conflict, and they will eventually arrive at a common understanding of where to go next. And this is the point of change, right? That one thing will lead to the next. This habit will enable you to ride the rapids of conflict, fully participating in the drama, but not attempting to actively manage the course of the resolution. Now, this habit puts a new spin on communication, conflict, trust, and action, right? If managers want their associates to demonstrate new ways of viewing and responding, they begin by modeling this new perspective. This was part of our leadership lecture, right? And lead by example, and know that you can change your thinking and acting. Your team will literally transform their style of communication, tolerance, and appreciation of conflict following your lead, and that will lead to improved team trust. And realize that you as a manager can make the choice to add the habit of designing your life and workplace one choice at a time or not. When you choose acts of kindness, compassion, or integrity, you are loading what's called the quantum dice and increasing the probability that others will choose to act accordingly. For example, if we want prosperity in our organizations to evolve and to occur, we begin by making socially responsible choices. We pay bills on time, we treat employees respectfully, we take good care of company resources, etc., etc., etc. When managers develop the habit of approaching conflict as a gift, they model a new way for those around them. As managers use this skill, they begin to own their own feelings rather than project them onto others. As they do so, others around them discover that all relationships are extraordinary learning opportunities. Creating the time and space for authentic dialogue, knowing that out of these conversations, passionate action will follow. During dialogue, team members will begin to take responsibility for their feelings and their behavior. Blame, denial, and defensiveness subside. Trust will build. And mindless conflict will be transformed into mindful cooperation. Conflict begins to generate fewer negative emotions, and new levels of appreciation, respect, and trust will emerge. Over the course of time, everyone will begin to understand and trust that no conflict occurs without reason. They also discover that those of us who have the most to teach are not always their favorite people, but they are the most valuable contributors. In short, everyone within such an evolved way of doing things will begin to embrace conflict, recognizing that it builds trust, builds team effectiveness, and assures continuous improvement in the face of change. And that is the gift of conflict. Well, it's happened again. You've survived another lecture, Lecture 7. So here's our Lecture 7 call to action. Guess what I'm going to say? Just guess. Conflict is a gift, okay? Look, conflict managed poorly can kill team spirit, can kill team effectiveness, and can result in a team's failure to achieve expected goals. Now, teams fail when they fail to build a culture of trust, when they let conflicts fester, or when they avoid conflict and hide from the real issues. High quality communication is key in determining the ability for a team to build trust over time. When communication is stifled and conflict overly managed, it's nipped in the bud, so to speak, opportunities for building trust are blocked. Conflict viewed as an act of appreciation through a positive lens can reveal those things that you do not presently see. When managers develop the habit of approaching conflict as a gift, they model a new way for those around them. And by embracing conflict, you will build trust. You will build team effectiveness and assure continuous improvement in the face of change.